Of Business Forum now, and I'm joined from Melbourne by Greg Hunt, Shadow Minister for Climate Action, Environment and Heritage. Shadow Minister, I should say, welcome to the programme.
It's a pleasure.
Greg, can I ask you first, just a couple before we get to COAG, the news on Asiano, half of the container freight in Australia it's responsible for, it's calling it an impasse over 18 months and with over 60 stoppages, and it goes to management flexibility once again. What would you do with the Fair Work Act?
Well, we don't have any plans to abolish the Fair Work Act, and we'll look at the review which the government has carefully. What we would do to deal with the problem of militant unionism, and I think we're seeing an example of that here, is reinstate the Australian Building and Construction Commission. We've seen a rise of militancy. There is a place for constructive unionism, but not for militant unionism. And that's why we need to reinstate the ABCC. I think that's an important step. We think that's an important step. And it's about making sure that we have productivity and flexibility in the economy without militancy. All
right, well, we'll see what happens over the next few days there. Another thing that happened today was that, I mentioned earlier in the programme, the New South Wales government has now called on the federal government to abandon the renewable energy target of 20% by 2020 when the carbon tax comes in. What's your reaction to that?
Well, we don't have any plans to do that. There has been an issue in relation to the creation of phantom credits. There's a review coming, but we remain committed to the renewable energy target. I think their real frustration is the fact that this is on top of the carbon tax. And so we've seen, I think, discussion about green tape today. The carbon tax itself comes with 1,100 pages of legislation, 19 acts, and 375 pages of regulation. So if you can remove the carbon tax, you've removed the overwhelming problem.
But this is now obviously a state Liberal policy in New South Wales. It's not coalition policy to abandon the renewable energy target.
No, not at federal level.
Yeah, because now you've got...
Our approach, though, is to reduce the burden dramatically by dealing with the fact of 19 acts, 1,100 pages of legislation and 375 pages of regulation, and that's growing and growing and growing. So that's the test for the Prime Minister if she respectfully would like to reduce green tape.
Because now you've got a situation, obviously, where there is a different policy amongst Liberals in Australia between state and federal on the 2020 target.
Look, we remain committed to that. If you remove the carbon tax, I think New South Wales' concerns will largely be dealt with. At the moment, they've got the problem of a carbon tax and other measures. Let's simplify the situation. As part of the carbon tax, we were doing work today. There are at least 40 different programs, initiatives or bodies involved in its implementation or administration. That is a massive regulatory, bureaucratic burden on the Australian economy, on states in particular. And just today, and I can see the New South Wales frustration, the State Treasurer, Mike Baird, announced that they are likely to take a $3 billion write-down on their electricity assets as a consequence directly of the carbon tax.
Turning to COAG, the Business Forum initiatives today, a big issue obviously was this streaming of environmental approvals. Government's chewing on this. You've got a new policy there for us.
We do. We want to dramatically simplify the environmental approvals process to end the duplication once and for all between the federal and state governments. That means, firstly, a one-stop shop application process. Secondly, a one-stop shop approvals process. And thirdly, to try to put in place time limits so as there is a genuine process to get things done, because business has never spoken to us about reducing standards, and we don't propose to reduce standards, but what they do worry about is indecision, delay, things that freeze their capital. And we want fast decisions, maintain the environmental standards, but a one-stop shop process which will end forever the duplication. But
have I got this right, that you actually are prepared to devolve the power to the states, essentially? The Environmental Biodiversity and Conservation Act, you're prepared to devolve that decision-making power on the whole to the states?
Well, we would like as many decisions as possible to be done through a single process, and as many of those to be done through agreement with the states. It's not a blank cheque, but it is an overwhelming commitment to the notion of federalism, the idea of decisions being taken locally where there's the best knowledge, not necessarily in Canberra where there's less knowledge and people may never have visited or seen the site in question. So yes, we do want to make real and significant changes to give much faster approvals and much greater authority at the state level, and
yep.
I'm upfront and clear about that.
Yep.
But above all else, we want to simplify the process while maintaining the standards.
Briefly, that may mean Campbell Newman supports you 100%, but if you don't get the government support, you're going to have trouble in the Senate, aren't you, with the Greens?
Well, we actually think that this may be possible to be done now, before the election, and if it's not done before the election, then it can be done after the election. So we will work constructively with the government. Unfortunately, we've seen, I think, about 16,000 new regulations come in and about 100 come out since the 2007 election. This is the chance to reduce regulation whilst maintaining standards, and we will work constructively with the government now, and if they won't do it, we sure will.
Greg Hunt, a very good day to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a real pleasure.
Now in the US, Apple